Math 083 Final Exam Review Problem 23 Parts A, B, C, and D. In Problem 23 we must solve each equation by using the square root property. Here we have the equation in Part A. The square root property method requires us to isolate the squared quantity, and here the squared quantity is r squared. We will isolate it first by adding 3 to both sides. This gives us 5r squared equals 80. Then we divide both sides by 5. We have r squared equals 16. The squared quantity is isolated, and we now apply the square root to both sides. When we do so, we must incorporate a plus or minus. We have r equals plus or minus 4. In other words, there are two solutions, r equals negative 4 and r equals positive 4. Now let's go on to part B. Y squared plus 24 equals 0. To use the square root property to solve, we must isolate the squared quantity, which is y squared. We subtract 24 from both sides. We get y squared equals negative 24. The squared quantity is isolated, so we apply the square root to both sides, incorporating a plus or minus. We get y equals plus or minus square root of negative 24. Now the square root of negative 24 is the square root of 4 times the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 6. 4 times negative 1 times 6 is indeed negative 24. And this is 2i square root of 6. So our two solutions are y equals negative 2i square root of 6 and y equals 2i square root of 6. Let's go on to part C. In part C, the squared quantity is 3x minus 5 quantity squared. We must isolate this. First we add 6 to both sides. We get 3x minus 5 quantity squared equals 36. The squared quantity is isolated, so we apply the square root to both sides of the equation, incorporating a plus or minus. Now the square root of 3x minus 5 quantity squared is 3x minus 5. On the other side of the equation we have positive or negative 6. We have two equations to solve. 3x minus 5 equals negative 6. 3x minus 5 equals positive 6. Here we add 5. 3x equals negative 1. Divide both sides by 3. X equals negative 1/3. For the other equation, we again add 5 to both sides. 3x equals 11. Divide both sides by 3. X equals 11/3. These are our two solutions. Here we have the equation in part D. The squared quantity is 2n plus 5 quantity squared. It is isolated. There are no numbers added, subtracted, multiplied, or divided to it on its side of the equation. Thus, we apply the square root to both sides, incorporating a plus or minus. So we have 2n plus 5 equals positive or negative square root of 75. Now the square root of 75 is the square root of 25 times the square root of 3, which is 5 square root of 3. So we have 2n plus 5 equals positive or negative 5 square root of 3. This gives us two equations to solve. 2n plus 5 equals negative 5 square root of 3. And 2n plus 5 equals positive 5 square root of 3. If we subtract 5, we have 2n equals negative 5 minus 5 square root of 3. And dividing both sides by 2, we get n equals negative 5 minus 5 square root of 3, all divided by 2. Similarly, for the other equation, we begin by subtracting 5 from both sides. We get 2n equals negative 5 plus 5 square root of 3. And dividing both sides by 2, we get the other solution,